Well, welcome to the CFA Research Challenge paper masterclass. We have David Stevens on the line. We'll be helping answer a lot of questions about, do's and don'ts of the paper and different things like that. So, David, just kind of to start, the independent analyst perspective is very important throughout this paper, and the rules require that it be done independently. So, in your opinion, how does a student written paper transition from looking like a class assignment to more of a professional grade institutional report?
Well, I think one of the things key, particularly in a group project like this, where often various sections of the report are divvied out amongst the team, is to make sure that when you read through it, it sounds like it was written by one person, not written by three, four, or five people, where you're like, wait a minute, that's total different change of tone, how it's structured. It's very jarring. It doesn't feel like a unified report. So I think that would be one of them. And a little bit later we may talk about charts, but also kind of throwing in charts that are just like, oh, I copied this one from this source and this one from another, and it looks like a collage of reports as opposed to a unified a professional report, I would say. So that those to me are the big things that now as a grader in the past, would that explicitly affect my grading of it? No, but it kind of colors your perception of the report as a grader. So you may be subconsciously less likely to award a point if it feels like it's not as professionally done. I'm just trying to be honest about it. But I mean, when we're going through grading it, we're trying to grade it on the merits of the content, but the presentation is important as well.
Yeah, no, well said. And you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but kind of the strategic use of those pages throughout the body of the paper with charts or with general analysis, it's really easy to go in depth in one area and then kind of summarize in another. If you were struggling with some of that page length, where would you summarize information or maybe utilize the appendix versus going more in depth?
Um, I think, well, let me start at the other side of it and go, where would I go in depth? I would probably, where are the most points first off, right? Valuation and financial analysis are the two biggest point places you can earn points. So I think that's where you definitely need to show that strength. Now, as a reader of these reports, I think of these as a initiation of coverage report on a company. So this is like the first report out. This is not a maintenance. This is not a follow-up. So there is some importance to putting a good business description in there. Does it have to be half a page? Good golly, no. But particularly if there's certain aspects of a company, Lifetime. I know a little bit about Lifetime, but I don't know enough about it as an outside person reading the report. So I want to know a little bit more about it. Or past companies is like, oh, they have three major divisions. Well, I need to understand what those are before I get into the report. So you can scrimp on it a little bit. You don't have to go into great detail. Maybe I would say competitive landscape that could be maybe scaled back, and some of that could be augmented in the footnotes. Would be an area. So it depends a lot on the company, and that's what we're relying on the students, the writers of this report to decide which of these areas I really need to spend time on and share with the judges, knowing that their counterparts at the other schools are trying to do the same thing, but when they're making a case, they need to make sure to highlight the areas that they think are most uh, relevant, pertinent to this company in this analysis. So I don't think it's a blanket. You can cut back on this one or cut back on that one because and for some companies, the ESG component might be a very important thing and you really want to highlight that. And others, it might be a less important thing and you can scale it back.
Mhm. Yes, thank you for that color. I think in a lot of areas it's very helpful to tie each section back to your overall thesis and what you think about the company. So that was well said. Kind
Yeah.
of going into the appendix again with charts. Sometimes the appendix can be seen as just a data dump of secondary charts that maybe didn't make it into like the main body of the paper. How are students going to like utilize that and make sure that the judges are paying attention to the appendix and all of the information that went into that? Kind of what are you looking for when you see a paper?
Well, I would view the appendix as supplemental, right? I will go take a look at it, but to a certain extent, the the report needs to lead me to that and maybe tell me about, hey, if you go and look at Appendix B, you can see how we ran three different valuation models. And here, you'll see the full results in the appendix. The summary of it is this, and we weighted them this way. That would be in the main body, but the models themselves could be back in the appendix, so I don't need it all in the report. So it's to that regard. Going to charts is if you have a chart in the report, make sure to reference it. Don't just have a chart to fill page space. Tell me what it's relevant to, and hopefully have that discussion in the chart on the same page. So I'm not having to flip back and forth to look at the chart and read your analysis about it in two different pages. It doesn't always work out just on where it fits, and I get that, but that's just something. And even on research reports from Wall Street firms, it doesn't always happen on the same page. So I'm not overly judging, but I'm just saying from a grader standpoint, it's or the reader standpoint, it's easier if it's kind of together.
Mhm. Yes, no, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of going based on that, the flipping back and forth, a lot of times graders are very busy investment professionals. So are there any additional formatting choices that the students could be paying attention to, like headers, bolding? You kind of touched on graph references already, but maybe additional things that make the report easier to digest during the first pass so we can really pay attention to the content of the report itself.
Well, it would be very helpful to use the suggested headers or the areas that are in the grading matrix. I've seen reports where, yeah, they have financial analysis in there, but they never bold and tell me where it is. It's kind of scattered through and it's hard to say, oh, is this part of their financial analysis or is this their valuation work? Where it is, how do I grade this? How they want me to look at it? And if they're making me work too hard, they're probably not going to get as good a points as if somebody who lays it out directly for me. And I've seen some reports over the years where they choose to come up with their own headers instead of these. And once again, I'm scratching my head saying they're calling it, security analysis or something. And it's like, well, where is that? What is that? How am I supposed to interpret what that is? Make it easy for me as a grader to know which sections this information you're giving me is for.
Mhm. No, well said. I've definitely seen that as well, and it can be very confusing when you go to grade the papers.
Yeah.
Kind of going into some of these sections now of the paper itself. First, the investment summary. I know when I'm grading a paper, that's the first place I always look to, and it's often the very first thing in the report. So, what makes an investment summary so compelling that a grader would immediately want to keep reading? And then, additionally, what elements, in your opinion, need to be in that summary so that we understand what the thesis is going forward?
Obviously, I mean, it's probably going to be above that as well, but spell it out. What are you saying I should do? How do I act on this? Am I buying the stock? Am I selling the stock? Am I waiting for a better price level to buy it? What's your key takeaway from this report? Similar to when I go into a client meeting, I want to leave them with one, two, three, four takeaways from that meeting going in. I have a plan. Same way with the research board. What is your one, two, maybe three takeaways that I would be looking to get from this report? That should be in the summary, and then everything behind it is the substantive part and why you got to those conclusions, and more of the why, as opposed to here's the high level things that I really want to leave you with.
Mhm. No, that's well said because I think a lot of times, at least in the past, I've seen where the investment summary is copy and pasted from somewhere else in the paper. So, really having that be the high level overview and the rest needs to be much more detailed to kind of support that makes a lot of sense to me. So,
Yep.
kind of going on
I mean,
to,
to your point, Jordan, most of your readers of these reports in real life and even here, busy professionals, bullet pointing almost in that section, right? And get into more of the detail farther behind. So it's like, oh, boom, hey, we like lifetime. We've got a price target on this. We see membership growth rates. We see, they have the ability to raise prices. They're adding classes, whatever those key metrics are to driving lifetime's growth that you think it makes it valuable. Hit those high level. You don't have to detail about that, but just say membership is growing 8% a year, whatever the number is. And then you later on in the report where you're talking about it, you spell it out more, but just bullet point it real high level. So, oh, great. If nothing else, here's my three takeaways.
Mhm. No, definitely. And I know, like, for the catalysts, for instance, in some papers, some of them will bold like catalyst one or what they name the catalyst, and it jumps out right away. That's always
Yep.
something I'm looking for to make sure that I know what are the three or four main reasons why you like this name or you don't like this name. And so, like you said, like the bullet points, it really does make a difference because it stands out right away as a grader at that point.
Yep.
So, kind of going on to the business description versus more of like an analysis of the business. Many teams spend a lot of time. I've seen some teams spend like two entire pages describing what the business is. So what elements like do you think need to go beyond just simple analysis to truly understand the company's competitive moat? Like, yes, like you mentioned earlier, it's important to understand and have a business description in there, but do you see any points of analysis that you're looking for in the business description, or keep that short and save the analysis for other areas of the paper?
Personally, I'm thinking it's really is the description of the company. You can throw a few points in, but it's probably more later, unless there's
Mhm.
something that's like, hey, we see that their ability to do X is different than their competitors, right? That they provide a holistic approach within their gyms. They're not just a weightlifting room, or they're not just this or whatever. That could be a reason why you go on to more in the description. But to me, the business description is tell me what it is, and like I said, if it's a complex business, then you have to go in more. If it's a relatively straightforward business, and if you understand a good moat, you could throw that in there as well, or a couple. But I would keep that fairly short, and then that's more into the analysis and the why you like it so much.
Mhm.
Do
Yes,
you
no,
do
that
you have a
makes
different
sense.
feeling, Jordan?
No, I think you alluded to it a little bit about like I think they do X better than their competitors. Sometimes having that competitive moat spelled out super early in the papers is helpful. Um, but I don't think you need to spend a ton of time analyzing anything in that section. It's keep it brief, and I feel like a lot of times people want to go really in depth and have a lot of detail there that maybe we don't necessarily need in the analysis later on. It would be more helpful, like you said.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's better to spend that your time and your page space elsewhere, probably.
Mhm. Especially with financial analysis and valuation, like you had alluded to earlier, those are two very highly like important categories for the paper. And I see sometimes people will spend a lot of time on the forefront of describing what the business is and not enough time explaining what the financials are, which kind of leads me into my next question. So sometimes we'll see people just simply list out financials or different metrics that they're looking at, but not really give us any sort of an analysis or tie back to what their thesis is. How would you like to see that represented when you're looking at grading a paper? Are you paying attention to, okay, are they just listing, revenue and EPS growth, or are they tying it back into here's why we like the company and this supports it?
Yeah, I would like to see more than just here's the numbers. Even if it's, hey, let's talk about what the trend has been in these numbers,
Mhm.
right? It's instead of a snapshot in time, why is it improving, or why, hey, they're doing it at a high level and they've been able to show they can maintain it at a high level for a long period of time. That's more than just giving me a kind of raw data dump in the analysis. Financial analysis is not just giving me the kind of raw numbers, even raw ratios. It's spelling it out a little bit more why these are important to this company or this industry and why we need to look at them.
Mhm.
So that to me is more important, and a lot of the financial analysis stuff can be put in the appendix, but what are the three or four items that are important in this case, or
Mhm.
that this team believes are important in this case?
I like how you worded that. Like, why is this important? Because a lot of times I feel like that's missing from the reports. Like, why did you pick this specific ratio or this specific trend to look at and analyze? I feel like just explaining that from the forefront and making it very, very clear helps you prevent questioning that in your head, and you can really focus on, okay, this is why it's important and here's what it is and what it means going forward. um, Beyond that, do you see any big gaps in that section that you're kind of questioning or you wish you had more information on from some of the teams that you're grading these papers for?
Well, I mean, it honestly, as you know, Jordan, I've been kind of heading up. You're taking over my role of heading up the graders, and so I
Mhm.
haven't actually graded papers in a couple of years, and so I'm trying to remember some specific examples in that regard. So I would actually maybe throw it back to you and see if you had something that would be more top of mind than I have right now.
Mhm. I think like a lot of times we'll see a lot of numbers in that section, which makes sense. It's the financial analysis section, but I would almost think it would be more beneficial to reference graphs and visuals in that section and have more words explaining like here's why it's important, here's the trend like you were saying, here's where we go going forward. It's important to find the right metrics. There's a lot of numbers we can analyze, but finding the right metrics is important even to this day as an analyst. And so being able to explain that and tie it back into your thesis and say, okay, well, maybe revenue is important for every company, but why is it specifically important for my thesis, and kind of backing it in that way as well is just an additional level of analysis that's helpful when you're reading the paper, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, exactly. And you know, and maybe in lifetime, it's what's membership churn. What is, you know,
exactly.
how many, even if somebody has a member, how often are they coming through the door so we have a chance to upsell them to some other service within the building as well?
Mm-hmm. And some of those numbers can be like individual, like research, right? Like I know when I was a participant in the research challenge, we did that. We called suppliers and stores and different things like that to try and get some of those numbers. There's not necessarily one section fits all for that kind of analysis or that kind of work that some of the teams do. But being able to throw some of those numbers in that you gathered from like individual surveys can be super helpful and just add a little bit more color and show the depth of the analysis and the research that a team has done.
And to that point, those reports over the years where they went out and did the research, you know, boots on the ground research or surveys or whatever, that stood out from so many of the other reports. And but also on the other side of the coin, it's like, okay, what were they asking? Do I find the results compelling, or was it just oh, we want to go do something and we've done it, but did it really add to the thesis? So I'm not saying you have to go do that, but most of your counterparts probably aren't going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can think of something relevant that you think will help your case, I would encourage you to do so.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, as long as it adds and doesn't distract from your overall thesis and an
Right.
argument that you're making for the company.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, going forward, valuation, there's often a lot of complexity in this section, at least from the papers that I've read, but not necessarily a lot of defensibility, not a lot of reason behind here's assumption X, here's why I chose it, and it's better than B, for instance. Kind of in your work when you're grading a paper, what do you want that to look like? Do you want as much complexity as possible? Do you want it really simple and like clearly explained? Obviously, it needs to be well reasoned, and you need to have a good reason for any assumption that you put in there. But would you prefer it to be super, super detailed or more clear cut and to the point?
I like it a little more clear cut. And once again, I'd love to have more detail and maybe the complexity put in the appendix. But I want to understand the assumptions because I'm a big, you know, particularly, you know, you think about DCF and some of the other ways of doing your evaluations. It's like, well, it's so much based on your assumptions of growth rates and terminal rates and are those and help me understand how you get to those and do I think those are defensible or help me understand why I should believe this is a rational way to look at this company so that I can then say, okay, I have confidence in what they've come up with and confidence in their recommendation, or oh boy, I'm pretty skeptical of what they're done because they're really expecting a whole lot to happen in years 12 through 16, and that's a long way out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, like 12 through 16, that's a long way out and a lot can change before then. So who knows, right? And so that's why, in my opinion, some of the papers that are able to better defend some of those assumptions and really have a clear cut, well researched reason for every single number that they're putting in there, they go above and beyond the rest of the pack because I understand where they're coming from and they're not just pulling numbers out of a hat.
Yep.
So, all right, going on to ESG, the section that I never know what I'm going to get from these papers. So the rules obviously want an ESG section. In your opinion, what are some of the things teams should really be focused on in this ESG section to help tie it back to their thesis and add to their analysis instead of just simply listing information or having a section that you have no idea how it ties back to the overall thesis?
Well, I mean, it can still be important even if it's not tied directly to the thesis, I would say, Jordan, because hey, depending on the investor is coming from, these things are important
Mhm.
or are more important than others to some. In corporate governance, it's the old Warren Buffett. What partners do you want to be invested with, right? The financials are one thing, but are these people, do they have good governance? Do you trust that these people are going to be good stewards of your money? That's falling into the governance section, right? And then the environmental and social can have big impacts as well to in Lifetime's case, it's to their employees, to their client base. So, these could be important factors to be considered. And so it's helpful to have that analysis, even if it doesn't tie directly to the financial analysis and the
Mhm.
price target, I think it still can be very important in why you might want to, or why it needs to be wrapped into the story. It can be to a certain extent a standalone segment
Mhm.
because it really is not just financial stuff, but we've seen over the years in this industry that particularly governance can come back and bite you, and the all of a sudden the financials aren't so good because they were cooking the books or there was other stuff going on that the governance wasn't there and we've now found a problem. So
Mhm. No, I love that you spent a lot of time talking about corporate governance because anytime I see that in a paper, I get excited because management is the one making all of the decisions for a company. If you don't have confidence in management, or if you're not looking into or talking about management, how do you trust anything else with the company? And in my
yep,
opinion, it's one of the most important things that you can talk about. And I think it ties back to, your overall view of the company because you're buying the company, management's running it. You really need to know what that is. And some of the other sections are even more important for other industries. For instance, if it was an oil company, maybe the environmental part would be much more important, you know what I mean, than for somebody like a Lifetime or something like that. So just understanding each of those individual components and being able to tie it back to how do people, like you said, all the stakeholders view the company and think about that company, that's going to impact the stock price going forward as well. So
yep.
I like how you brought that in and mentioned that. Kind of going on to risks, kind of we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but many of the teams list very general competition or macro trends as risks. As a team, how can you identify more company specific risks and maybe go beyond like the annual report risks that get listed and try and find something a little bit deeper and a little bit more pertinent to the individual company rather than the industry, the sector, or just the market in general?
Yeah, I mean, that's very helpful if they can do that. And
Mhm.
frankly, it's a challenge, right? But the company may or may not be trying to be explicit about some of those risks, but we need to try to ferret those out. But I think it's also important to weigh those risks instead of just saying, hey, we don't know what the macro is going to be, but we think it probably we're putting a relatively low risk or a high risk or quantify those numbers. This are the ones we think are the most important risk factors to be considered in here, whether it's, I just think all of a sudden about Lifetime, where all of a sudden, hey, there's as a retiree guy who's in the silver sneakers program, well, my silver sneakers program isn't going to work at Lifetime next year. What is that going to do to Lifetime? Those
Mhm.
things that are kind of exogenous to him, they didn't have control over that. That's a risk that perhaps it hurts them. Maybe it helps them because they don't have all these people coming in that aren't paying that much for them. I don't know, but those are risks to be taking into account. Uh, you know, so I think if you can enumerate them or scale them up and say this is a risk, but the probability of this happening, and then give me not just a probability of happening, but the old min max. Yeah, this has a low probability, but it could have a huge impact if it does occur.
Mhm.
And this has a high probability of happening, but the impact is relatively minor. So we shouldn't be overly concerned about this risk. So that could be more helpful. That's a way to broaden out that risk section as opposed to just enumerating, kind of generic risk factors.
Mhm. No, that's excellent because I've seen some papers that'll do that and even say the company's doing XYZ because they know this is a risk and this is something on the other side we should be paying attention to really understand that overall risk factor. And I think, it's so that section is so important. I think of it as like the exact opposite of your investment thesis. You're not always right in this industry. You're trying to be right more than you're wrong, but you're not always right. So if you're buying something, somebody's selling it. So like understanding where they're coming from oftentimes can help even strengthen your overall thesis and make you think more holistically about a situation. So kind of
Yep.
going next into back to the visuals that we kind of started with a little bit. What is like a gold standard chart or graphic that brings like a lot of clarity to you? Like, is there one chart that you see in a paper and you're like, I love this and I wish every single paper would have this chart there? Is there a certain way you would prefer the charts to look, like just copy and paste from Bloomberg and FactSet, or have it more like individual research? You put it into Excel, you made it look the way that you want your paper to look. How do you kind of think about charts in that way?
Yeah, well, kind of back to our summer discussion at the beginning, I prefer if the charts all are similarly constructed, if you will, so that's not jarring to the eye.
Mhm.
That being said, you've got to be true to, you don't have the data source to build the chart that maybe was from FactSet. I mean, even if you got it from FactSet and trying to reinterpret, unless you drop it into your own and create it, because we're seeing some of the charts that are dropped in from FactSet or Bloomberg, the clarity doesn't always come through on the paper, so that can be a challenge.
Mhm.
Um, and as I said, it doesn't look that professional when you've got, five different style of charts in there. For me, there's not a single bullet chart that's, oh boy, they've got this chart in, it's great, and or they don't have it in, it's because once again, it's so company specific.
Mhm.
What is the key metric or things that I need to see. And yes, I'm a visual person. I love seeing the graphs and the charts. It helps me. I'm then willing to go look at the data, but I'd rather have a nice picture to get it in my head and then look at the detail. Other people go right past the visuals because they're just pure number people. I get that too. But I think you need a healthy mix of the two.
Mhm. Yeah, you definitely do. I know for me, there's really only like one chart that I get super excited about every time, and it's revenue and EPS on the same chart, just seeing how they like tie together because to me, those two things matter for every company in the world. Right? Those are two things everybody pays attention to. And so if there's not a visual that shows revenue anywhere in the paper or EPS anywhere in the paper, it's harder for me to connect the dots sometimes. Like I see the numbers, but I want to be able to like visually see something in a graph or a chart or something like that. So that's why I ask. Um,
Cool.
one more question, mainly do like around industry analysis and competitive, analysis. Every company out there has competition. What are some of those things that you think are very important for companies and people to really be paying attention to when it comes to that competitive landscape and that environment? What are you looking for out of the students for these papers in the analysis of that environment? Because you can go really in depth or you could go really, really surface level because there's a lot of information there. So, kind of what are you looking for in that section?
Once again, I think this kind of goes back to in there, it can help augment their case of why they really like this company.
Mhm.
Or hey, here the one where here where the challenges are, right? Well, hey, we really like, this company is in a pretty good position, but this other company has staked out a niche that seems to be driving it, better or whatever. So that becomes a risk to in this case, maybe the lifetime because somebody else is doing something different. Doesn't mean lifetime can't come around and swing, but it's a risk to be considered. So I think that competitive landscape can be a nice way to either show how the subject company is doing things really well, or maybe they're just standard industry. They don't have anything overly that compelling, or they're challenged, but they have that's where the opportunity is, addressing that challenge and getting things turned in the right way. So I think that can be a nice way to further delineate the case for for your investment, pro or con.
Mhm. No, I agree. I love when there's a clear understanding of each competitor and you can tell that they took the time to really understand those companies, but then they also took the time to compare them to, like the Lifetime, the subject company, and how do those two interrelate in the industry? That's really what I want to get out of it is how does this really matter for the company that you're talking about? Because if you're just paying attention to like a simple company description of one of their peers, okay, why does that matter in this instance? Like that's what I really want to get out of it.
Yep.
Um, okay, so random question time. Red flags. Is there anything that you have seen in a paper that you would immediately start to question? What are they talking about? What are they doing? Or maybe start to doubt what they're talking about in general, regardless of how well written the paper is? Is there something that just immediately screams red flag when you see it?
Oh, I think it's more if it just feels like it's very fluff level conversation.
Mhm.
It's not the detail but going behind it. There's not uh, some nuance at all. It's just kind of broad brush strokes. Those are big red flags to me. I've seen other reports where, swear to God, it's like goes along and there's bracket says we need to insert chart here.
Yep. I've seen that before too.
Which means somebody didn't proofread it and go back and insert the chart that they need to. So it does that really does that say that they didn't do the analysis? No, but it doesn't. It says to me they didn't do a good job of putting together a professional report.
Mhm. The other
So
thing, surprisingly, I have seen is teams completely skip a section that they're going to be graded on. It's just not
yeah,
there anywhere.
yeah,
And to me, I'm like, okay, you didn't even take the time to read the instructions. I'm very concerned now. Like,
yeah.
where did that time go? Um,
Well, usually if I have a paper like that, there's multiple other problems in the report as well. And it's often been a case of it's a school that maybe this is the first or only second year they've done this, and so it is a learning curve, and they've just maybe someone in their team effed up and didn't get it done, and then all of a sudden the time pressure. I get that, but it is a big. It's going to be really hard to recover if you don't have a section in there that even if it's only a 5 point section, if you don't have it in there, that's a big red flag on everything else. So
mhm. No, exactly. It's better to have something than nothing, in my opinion, for that. Even if
yep,
it's more surface level for that one section. If a mistake happened and somebody didn't do it, right? I always try to get it done at least a day early, so if something like that happens, I know I have time to recover and at least put something on the page.
yep, yep.
So, kind of the last question that I have for you, David, and then we'll kind of open it up to anybody else that may have questions or want to add something here to the conversation. If you were going to go through the CFA Research Challenge today as a student, what's the first thing you would do before writing a single word of the report to ensure that you stay on track for a top score?
I guess I would probably think about, just charting out exactly, well, each section. What, we have to have these sections. What are the bullet point things in each of those sections that we want to make sure to hit on so that when we go to write it, that we go, yep, we put in our discussion on ROE. We put in our revenue and earnings per share chart to make Jordan happy. Yeah, we did. We did comparable analysis. We put the things that we want to, we kind of have this flow chart. So we say these are the things we want to have in the report, and then we have a checklist that we can go back behind and say we put in everything we planned to put in, and you didn't forget something, and it's not there all of a sudden.
Mhm. No, definitely. I do it in a more visual format, and it really doesn't matter which way you do it. I always like knowing, okay, where is this section going to go? Where it makes sense, right? How is it gonna flow? And then kind of doing boxes off to the side, like just scheduling it out. Like when do I need X section done because it's gonna rely on this other section and different things like that. Just making sure I have a timeline in conjunction with with all of those components and kind of mapping it out on a piece of paper. So I love that you said that. I think that's going to help the students a lot going forward, just kind of staying on track because that's super important for this. You do not want to be low on time when you're trying to get something like this accomplished. So I thank you for your time. And with that, I want to see if anybody has any questions or if Kurt wanted to add anything or Shannon or Megan.
Yeah, a quick
Uh,
question. Connor and Derek, could you tell me what school you're from?
and they can just put that in the chat too if they
Yep.
want, if that's easy. Shannon, good point. Or Connor, go ahead.
I'm a first year grader, so I'm just listening in. And hi, David. Hope you're
Hey,
doing well.
Connor. Doing good.
Everyone. Yeah, I'm Derek Ducart. The North Dakota Retirement and Investment Office, and I I went to the Carlson School of Management at U of M. So if that's the conflict of interest, I think we can probably have me not grade them, but I think everything else probably fair game.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
I just need that information.
We just didn't have you on our list of students, and we were like, oh, so no
Now we know
problem.
why.
We got that all squared away. Thank you.
I think the only thing that I would add is, Megan and Shannon have put all the previous winning reports on the CFA Research Challenge tab, CFA Society of Minnesota. That is an incredible place to start. You are absolutely not cheating by, looking at how other schools formulated, ideas and structured papers and things like that, right? We don't need to recreate the wheel on a lot of stuff there. Megan just put it in the chat. That's super, super helpful. So a good spot to start. Maybe just one thing I'll pose, and might be a little bit more Jordan oriented, because she's been through, the research challenge. But Jordan, talk a little bit about, like the paper isn't the last step, right? Like you're not just trying to get a paper out, right? You're doing a paper with the goal of progressing to the next round to the presentation. So maybe talk a little bit about maybe like some things that they should keep in mind as they're going through that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know when I was going through it, we really wanted to have a lot of our analysis done for the paper, obviously, but that doesn't mean we stopped analyzing the company after we submitted the paper. We kept going because there's always more information. I mean, the markets are open 5 days a week. There's always something going on. There's always more information that you can find. And even if it didn't make its way into the paper, if you progressed onto the presentation round and you can have that extra bit of information that maybe another team didn't take the time to find, it's just going to put you one step ahead of the competition at that level. So things are always constantly evolving, making sure that your numbers aren't so ingrained that you're not willing to change them, because maybe after your paper comes out, you find a piece of information that slightly changes your growth metrics or something that you're expecting for the company. That's okay. That's real life. That happens all the time. I've had that happen to me at work. You need to be able to take that and go with it and be able to change things up and evolve with it. Otherwise, somebody else is going to beat you to the punch and they're going to do better at that next round. The other thing that I found really helpful when I was going through it, when I was thinking through the paper, is okay, this is the information I have. If I was coming in fresh and I had no idea about this company, what questions would I have immediately? How do I answer those? How do I get in front of those? And then secondarily, okay, if I'm an expert at this company, what am I going to be paying attention to and what questions can I have and how do you get in front of those? You're not going to catch everything, right? Somebody's going to come up with something you had no idea about. But if you can get 99% of those questions and know what you're going to say, it's going to help you so that when you are at that next round and when you are in the presentations, you're not just standing up there wasting time thinking, but you know kind of what you're going to say because you'll get more questions in and you'll just look that much more professional and like you've done that much more research because of it.
One question I'll just kind of close with, David, for you, I'll pose the question of getting feedback on papers, right? That's a huge piece. Maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit about just in life of getting feedback like that, maybe how you would incorporate that, how you would think about that, how you think about constructive criticism as you get into the real world, and that people aren't necessarily out there trying to get you, but trying to help you. I think would be really interesting to hear from you. And then Jordan, I'll have you just add in at the end how you take that constructive criticism from judges and maybe help yourself moving into the presentation.
Mhm.
Yeah, so particularly for the folks grading the papers, giving feedback on the reports is so important. The teams that follow the next year will have that feedback when they look and say, oh, when we're doing this, we need to do that or do this better or whatever. And even the best reports have things where they can do things better. And when you have 4 or 5 different people reading and giving you comments, we come up with different points, and it may not be like, wait a minute, the one guy said this, but well, they all have a different perspective and they have another way of looking at it, which is, I think, very helpful. And so detailing it out, I never go in with trying to go in with a sword and like, cut somebody up, but it's like, hey, you really needed more depth around your analysis. You need to stretch this out a little bit more. But some of the comments are like, hey, really nice job in this section. We really like this. And it's not just all negative stuff. We really like to give comments where we see a positive thing and kind of reinforce and get that as well. So those kind of comments on either side are important. I've heard over the years from, some of the teams, it's like, hey, we appreciate getting the feedback, help us understand it maybe a little bit more. We've gotten that feedback sometimes through Megan or whatever. But it's in some ways it's easier, sitting here grading the report to give comments when you don't have to look the person in the face. It's just a faceless thing, but knowing that it's going to still be helpful is important. When you get out in the real world, it's hard sometimes if you're the one being given feedback to take it. But the important thing is to listen, absorb it, and don't think these people, as you said, Kurt, these people are not out to get you. They're trying to help you. Everybody wants, in general, everybody's out there trying to help you succeed and trying to tell you, hey, if you do this a little bit better, you focus on this a little bit better, it's going to make your argument or your rationale seem more persuasive, more compelling, more likely to get action taken on it. Years ago, when I worked at American Express, they said, our analysts, you can be a great analyst and you can make a great call on a stock, but if you can't convince one of the portfolio managers to buy it, it's a wasted recommendation. So you got to be, and that's feedback is right. How do you make that story compelling to get somebody? It's not just your ability to pick a good winner. You got to be compelling enough to get people to believe it and invest in it. And that's part of what comes through in your report and then later on in your oral presentations in this as well.
Mhm. No, those are excellent points, David. I think like as a participant, it's not even that long ago, but it seems like it when I was going through the research challenge, I paid attention to every single piece of feedback. If a judge said that they liked it, I made sure we talked about it in our presentation. If the judge said, "Hey, you need to think about XYZ or you need to go more in depth here," we made sure that we did that. And it's not just comments like nice job, like I can't do anything with that. Like great, okay, you liked it, but like what specifically really stood out to you in this section? That was something I was always looking for as a participant because I wanted that feedback. These are investment professionals that really know what they're talking about in the industry, so I want as much information from them and as much knowledge from them as possible because I'm going to absorb that and I'm going to use that for years to come. And then on the second side, now that I've been a research paper grader, what I want to do is make sure that my comments are as clear cut and to the point as possible so that people know exactly what I liked and exactly what I didn't like and why, because I know that they're going to use that. Sometimes I feel like it's easy to say, oh, yeah, you did great. Okay, but why do you think that? Give me a little bit more in that comment section. I try to write as much as possible, as much as fits in that little box, because I know how important that is. It really makes the difference for the next round as well. Because, like Kurt said, the paper is not the end.
Absolutely. Jordan, David, thank you. I appreciate that. Lee, thank you for hopping on from St. Ben, St. John's. Great to have you. I appreciate it. Megan, Shannon, if there's anything else, I'll open it up to you guys. But this is really helpful. This recording will be sent out and kind of set in stone that we can reference this for years to come for graders and for students. So I want to say thank you.